St. John Paul II was born May 18, 1920, in Wadwick, Poland. He was Bishop of Rome and the head of the Catholic Church from 1978 to 2005. He was the first Italian pope in 455 years and the first from a Slavic country. As part of his effort to promote greater understanding between nations and religions, he undertook many trips abroad, traveling far greater distances than had all other popes combined. He extended his influence past the church by campaigning against political oppression and criticizing the materialism of the West. His unabashed Polish nationalism and his emphasis on nonviolent political activism aided the Solidarity movement in communist Poland in the 1980s and ultimately contributed to the peaceful dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991.
John Paul's characteristic mixture of religion and politics and its deep roots in Poland became evident during the first year of his pontificate in his 4 trips abroad. He went first to the Dominican Republic, Mexico, and the Bahamas, preached on human rights, personal dignity, and religious freedom. John Paul used his influence among Catholics and throughout the world to advance the recognition of human dignity and to deter the use of violence. His second trip in June 1979 was Poland, where he declared to his audiences that their Catholic faith dictated that they had a right to be free. Many Poles said later that the sight of themselves assembled in enormous but orderly gatherings made them realize their own political strength and encouraged their subsequent defiance of the communist regime. Pope John Paul II had an alliance with Ronald Reagan. Reagan's personal faith as a Protestant and Pope John Paul II's respect enabled the two world leaders to form a cooperative geopolitical relationship. Reagan and John Paul II had similar goals in ending the oppressive influence of the Soviet regime in Eastern Europe, Poland in particular as the Pope's native country. The two leaders were able to coordinate their efforts to put increasing political, economic, and information pressure on the Soviet Union and General Secretary Gorbachev, which in the end helped bring the collapse of the Soviet Union.
Pope John Paul II indicated a possible intention to pressure Soviet leaders by means of church congregations across Eastern Europe. Although such an eastern arm of his anti-Soviet campaign never materialized, the Soviet government viewed it as a serious threat. As the Polish Solidarity movement gained momentum, John Paul repeatedly emphasized to his fellow Poles the importance of pressing for change peacefully, so as not to give the communist regime a justification for using force and dismantling the trade union. Despite the arrest of thousands of Solidarity members and years of uncertainty, the movement persevered. In April 1989, the communists legalized the trade union, and in June of that year, Solidarity made a strong showing in free elections. The Soviet Union collapsed on December 26, 1991. His persistence helped inspire similar movements in other Soviet bloc countries, and his approach had made a new kind of thinking possible.
In 1990, he declared an anti-Semitism a sin against God and humanity. And throughout his papacy, he used his influences and efforts to help end nearly 2,000 years of oppression and violence inflicted on Jews by Christians. Beginning in the early 1900s, the once robust John Paul was increasingly slowed by Parkinson's disease and by a series of operations. Nevertheless, he maintained a rigorous schedule, insisting that his visible suffering was part of his mystery. To Abbai's ear urging him to slow down, he reportedly said simply, "If I collapse, I collapse," although he may have been considered the possibility of resignation. He remained silent on the subject. His funeral in April 2005 drew to Rome millions of pilgrims as well as a number of the world's former and current political leaders. John Paul's emphasis on human rights and national and religious freedom suggested to some a theology that was excessively human-centered and inefficiently Christian-centered. From the start of his pontificate, John Paul tried to reassert a sense of religious challenges and discipline by making firm declaration about personal morality and their religious life.